If you're anything like me, I'm sure you've had that, I must need a new camera because my stuff doesn't look as good as everybody else's feeling. You don't need a new camera. You might just need to learn a few basic things that take your footage from not so good to epic, which is exactly why you're here, right? I just finished my Better Sony Videos in an Hour workshop, and I realized that there are a few hot topics from each of the categories that if you get right, you'll have a very simple system to make your Sony videos look way better. Let's get into those now, and if you want to learn more about that deep dive workshop, I'll share with you some details about that towards the end. The first thing that we're going to take a look at is going to be some general settings, and you're not going to want to skip this because everything we're going to talk about with exposure and white balance is going to tie back to this. And regardless of what Sony camera you have, this is all going to be accessible, and all the things that we look at today are very basic, and they're going to be called the exact same thing in your camera. So first thing is going to be shooting mode, and you're either going to be accessing this in the menu that I'm looking at right here where it says shoot mode. This is where you can choose between manual exposure, shutter priority, aperture priority, and your camera probably comes out of box in intelligent auto, or your camera might have one of these dials up top, and that's how you would adjust it. Same thing, it has a dial for, there's a section for auto, there's manual, S is shutter priority, A is aperture priority. That's the way that you'll access those if you happen to have a camera with a dial up top. Oh, and make sure you're in video mode too. Your camera will have some kind of toggle that looks like one of these two, and it's gonna have a video camera. You'll want to be in video mode for this one. I'm gonna briefly talk about auto exposure here. When I'm in auto exposure, my camera is gonna be making all of the exposure. Let's see if I can get to change. You can see the f-stop, the aperture changing down there as I kind of enter the shadows here. Your camera is going to be making all of the exposure and all of the tone and color adjustments for you. So I can get like a little vloggy shot there. It's going to be making all of those adjustments for you. You can see how the aperture is changing down there. The shutter speed and ISO, those are also going to change, and you're going to be stuck in auto white balance. The benefit to auto is that you can use your camera, and you're not going to get all frustrated and bogged down by all these settings and not getting even usable images. The downside with auto is that you're not going to be maximizing the true potential of your camera. And one more thing with auto is that when you get a good looking shot, it's usually not systematic and repeatable because you don't know exactly what the settings were for why you got that good shot in the first place. I'm going to put the camera into manual mode, and if you're following along, I'd strongly suggest that you do the same for right now. So in manual mode, what this does, this gives you complete control. You can see I'm adjusting my ISO, I can adjust my aperture, I can adjust my shutter speed, I can make all these adjustments, I can adjust my white balance. These are all things that you can do when you're in manual mode, and everything that we're going to be looking at in these settings and through the exposure and white balance, we're going to be doing the adjustments in manual mode, so you're going to be following along with that. It also gives you access to all of your settings and customization in the camera. And if you're not in manual, a lot of the things we talk about when you go to click on them, if you're in auto, for example, they're going to be grayed out and not changeable. And look, like, I get it if you're not confident with manual, if that sounds intimidating. When you're first starting out, use auto because you're going to create, but do practice shots in manual. Practice the things we talk about in this video in manual, in the shots that nobody's ever going to see. I can assure you that some of your favorite YouTubers or people you look up to and you like the quality of their videos, they do practice shots way more than you think. And at some point, your practice shots in manual, that's going to become your go-to because you're so confident and you won't use auto ever again. Let's talk about a few codecs. So I'm going to go to image quality here. Under image quality, I'm going to click on file format. Your camera might not have all these options, it might have more, but here's the one too. All right, we got these cameras to record in 4K. Okay, so use 4K, it's your highest resolution, your best quality. These are all different codecs here: XAVC-HS, XAVC-S, and XAVC-SI. SI is your highest quality. They're also huge file types. They're going to suck up a lot of storage. XAVC-S is my go-to, and XAVC-HS is like the blend of like highest quality plus smaller files. The difference here is that your computer has to be able to encode XAVC-HS, which is H.265 file type. So if your computer can't do that, you're going to be in a world of hurt if you record in that. To be honest with you, I don't see a huge difference between XAVC-S and XAVC-SI when it comes to quality. I'm recording in XAVC-S 24/7. And under movie settings here, I'm going to go in here and let's go to record setting first. We'll come back to frame rate. If you have 10-bit, use it. It's going to be your best colors and tones and a lot of flexibility with your colors, and you're going to like the look of that a lot. 8-bit is also fine if you master the fundamentals we're talking about today, but 10-bit is simply just going to give you a bit of a leg up. Again, 8-bit's totally fine. And then pick the biggest number, right? You can see here that I see 140M 422 10-bit. This is 100M 420. Sometimes those will say 10-bit too, but just pick your biggest number in front of the M and preferably 422. That's just a kind of a quality thing. Next is your frame rate. Different cameras are going to have different options here. 24 or 30, it's a preference thing. I record in 30, which you guys let me know in the comments how much you hate that. But 24 or 30 is going to be your regular motion stuff. And then higher frame rates like 60 and 120, you would use that for something that you want to slow down and have higher frames for slow motion. Next, we're going to go down to this exposure and color container. And you're looking for a setting, usually under color and tone. It also lives in a bunch of different places in your camera, but it's called picture profile. And in picture profile, these different containers, you can choose things like S-Log3, S-Cinetone, Cine2, Hybrid Log Gamma. All great things, but I'm going to keep it really simple, and I encourage you guys to just turn picture profiles off. Turn picture profiles off to learn these fundamentals because for a few reasons. Number one, it's going to keep things really simple. Number two is that there's no picture profile that's going to outperform well-done fundamentals with exposure and white balance. And lastly, different picture profiles are going to change. Each of them kind of behave differently and change some of the exposure values that we're about to look at. They change them slightly. So I can't emphasize this enough. Learn how to do these things with no picture profile. Once you master that, feel free to add them because it can be a lot of fun. I record primarily in S-Log3. I'll put a link toward the end of this video more in detail about my systems with S-Log3 and expanding upon some of the fundamentals that we learn. But yes, master these fundamentals with no picture profile and then dive in. That is what has worked best for me over the years, and I think it will serve you very well too. So when you're in manual, there's two things you want to customize in your camera to be able to rapidly change your ISO and aperture, which you'll use for exposure. So down here at I call it a briefcase. Y'all always correct me and say it's the toolbox. So down here at the toolbox/briefcase, we're going to go into Operation Customize. And in Operation Customize, using the video version here, you can do this for photo too. We're talking about video though, so I'm going to click on that. Two things you want to do, okay? There's a lot you can customize in here. We're not going to go through in great detail everything that I customize in here and why. However, under these wheels here, I'm going to go in, and yours will look different out of box, but let's take this first one here. And for me, on the ZV-E10 Mark II that I'm using, I have one wheel option up top. Whatever that says out of box, I'm going to click on it and I'm going to go back into the camera and I'm going to remap that to aperture. Next, I'm going to take this spinny wheel down here and I'm going to map that one to ISO. Okay, I'm going to remap those so that they say AV, which is aperture, or ISO. That way, when I'm in the camera here, all I have to do is spin this wheel and I can rapidly change my ISO settings, or this dial up top, I can quickly change my aperture. We're not going to be mapping things to shutter speed. I'll talk about that why shortly, but those are your quick adjustments for changing the brightness or your exposure that you'll be using in video. Let's dive into exposure. There's a lot to talk about, but we're going to keep it really simple. The goal with exposure is simple, not too bright, not too dark, but just right. And also doing that in a way that's incredibly repeatable. That way you can do it for any type of shot that you're doing. The first thing is going to be shutter speed. We got to talk about what it does and why we actually can't really use it for exposure. So my shutter speed is in the bottom left on the menu there. And right now it says 1/60. As I make that number higher, our image gets darker. And as we make that number lower, our image gets brighter. Pretty straightforward. However, one thing that you want to do with video is you want your shutter speed to be double your frame rate. So right now I'm recording in 30p, that's my frame rate. And double my frame rate would be 1/60. If I was recording in 24 frames a second, my shutter speed, the closest number to that would be 1/50, because we can't get, in this camera at least, some cameras you can't get exactly 1/48. So we would do that in 1/50. But here's a little segment from the workshop that talks about why we can't use that. If you look at these two clips next to each other, one of them is filmed at the correct shutter speed, beating twice the frame rate, and you see natural motion blur. The other one is filmed at a very high shutter speed, and we're getting more of that jittery effect. Not very natural, and ultimately just not going to have the right feel to your video. So the reason we want to do twice the frame rate for our shutter speed is because it's going to produce natural motion blur for our shots. Next is aperture. And with aperture, it's your f-stop down there. And the lower the number, the brighter the image. The higher the number, the darker the image. What this is also doing is if you look at, I'm just going to put this at f1.4. If you look at how much blur is behind the subject here that's in focus, if you look at the amount of blur back there, there's a lot of blur at a lower f-stop number. When I make that number a lot higher, and let me just get the exposure somewhere close to the same. When you look at the amount of blur back there now, there's next to no blur. So the higher the number on the f-stop, less blur in the out of focus areas. And the lower the number, the more blur, that's way too bright, but the more blur that we're gonna have in those out of focus areas. And the next piece that we can utilize in our camera for making our images brighter or darker, besides light, is gonna be ISO. So the higher our ISO number, the brighter the image is going to be. I'm just compensating for that with my aperture here. So the higher the ISO, the brighter the image will be. And the lower the ISO, the darker the image will be. It does come with some trade-offs though. When we get into these higher ISO numbers, right now I have this at 16,000. And I'm just going to zoom in on the section back there in the shadows. With higher ISO, you're going to be introducing some noise into the darker parts, and generally, depending on how high the ISO gets, like all over your shot, it can make it less sharp, can kind of play with the colors and just not look as pro. So generally speaking, lower the ISO, the better when it comes, just in general, lower the ISO, the better the result, but that doesn't mean you can't use higher ISOs at times. Let's pull out of camera settings for a second, take a breather. Let's understand this concept when it comes to exposure. Taking a look at this exposure chart. Don't overthink this, just simply understand that almost anything in the scene can be represented by a numerical value. So pure white, a zebra value, or a numerical value of 100, the brightest highlight. Bright white, slight detail in the highlights would be a numerical value of 90. Gray white or ideal detail in the highlights would be 80. Pale white skin tones or light gray would be a numerical value of 70. Average white skin tones is 60. Tan white or light black skin tones would be 50. And dark black skin tones would be 40. I'll put a link for that chart if you want to download it for free down below, but how we actually utilize that information is the most important thing. And here's how to use some settings in camera that will help us with that chart. I promise you this will all make sense. I'm going to go into my exposure and color container, looking for a setting that says zebra display. First thing, make sure your zebra display is turned on so that this will all work. Next, under zebra level, the camera has some presets here, but I actually like going all the way down to one of these custom settings, doesn't matter which one, and it will give you an option of standard range or lower limit. We want to be in lower limit. Okay, and in lower limit, we can then simply just adjust these numbers. And if you're kind of thinking ahead, yes, the short answer is that those numbers, they match the chart perfectly. Okay, those numbers, 100 on my lower limit zebras matches the 100 on the chart. 90 on my zebra values matches the 90 on the chart, and so on and so forth. Just a really quick note, I'm going to be showing you guys these zebras using the Sony M&C app. Simply because you can see the zebras a lot more clearly than if I do it in camera. It's all the exact same though. So on this app, when you see f-stop or ISO, they're just reflecting what I'm doing in camera. And when I change on the app, like the lower limit on zebras, a little bit of a different interface, but it's doing the exact same thing that I just showed you in the camera menu. So here's how to use zebras. Just think of zebras, just change the word zebra to indicator. It's just telling you in the frame, if the zebras are showing up or the indicators are showing up, it's just saying that there's that thing in the frame is at or above the numerical value that you set in your camera. All right. So as I said, I'm in the app here. It's going to look a little bit different, right? But under my zebra settings, okay, under zebra settings, I'm going to put my value here. Let's put our value to 70. Okay, value is set to 70. So what that means is that right now, looking at this frame, wherever zebras are, they are at the value of 70 or greater. Okay, so going back to our chart, if we understand that these are telling us when something is at a value and we know that we want to get things to a certain numerical value from the chart, these can be really helpful. They make that really practical for you. Let's say that we wanted to expose a light pale white skin tone to 70. I have my zebra value set to 70. That would be this skin tone right here. And right now it has no zebras on it. That means it is lower than 70. We're not at the target yet. I'm going to be showing this to you guys using aperture and ISO. If you have the ability to increase your lighting, that can be another thing that helps out with this. But let's just go with aperture and ISO to get the point across. I want you guys to try to get this really consistent where you're not if you're trying to get this skin tone exactly at 70, don't worry about where zebras are anywhere else on the shot. Just get that skin tone to 70, right? So I know, I'm just going to be using ISO, there's zebras showing up on that skin tone, right? They weren't showing up here at that ISO of 125, but at 160, they show up, right? So that means we're looking for the point where they just start to show up. And then I usually pull back by one click of ISO. And now we know that they're probably right at 70 or slightly below it, maybe like 68, 69, incredibly close. And that would be our exposure for the shot. I don't care that there's zebras elsewhere in the frame. I just want to know for a fact that that skin tone is exactly at, if not slightly below 70. And you can do that for anything. It doesn't have to be a skin tone. The other thing is, let's use gray. Let's use this middle gray over here, which I know actually has to be exposed to just over 46. In your camera, you actually can't, that's the nice thing about the app, you can find lower numbers, but in your camera, it doesn't go lower than 50 in your camera. So let me explain that for a second. It doesn't go lower than 50. Okay, let's just make sure zebras are completely disappeared, and they are right now. Again, we're trying to get this exposed to 46. Okay. Here's the big takeaway. If you expose like neutral gray to about 46, 47, somewhere in there, everything else will be exposed properly as long as it's in the same scene and facing the same light source. Okay. So we just set it to a zebra level of 50. And I know that right now I have zebras just barely showing up at 50 on that gray, which again, I'm trying to expose that to about 46. Okay. If I just pull back by one click of ISO where it just disappears, then I know that it's not 50. It's probably something slightly lower than 50, about 46. And that would be my exposure for the shot. And if you can master all of that, you'll get consistent exposure for all your videos. Okay, that covers everything with exposure. Next, we gotta talk about white balance, which is the next piece of making your videos look really good. Exposure is the brightness, not too bright, not too dark, just right. White balance is gonna be, do the colors and tones look natural? In my menu and under this exposure and color container, you're gonna see a menu item called white balance, which is what we'll be talking about. And once you click on this first setting here that just says white balance, this is when your camera out of box is going to be in auto white balance. And the real issue with auto white balance is that even in a controlled environment scene like this, and especially in uncontrolled ones, but even in controlled environments like this, the camera's constantly scanning and looking for proper white balance, which means your shot and your frame can, like, the colors and tones can slightly just kind of shift around for no good reason. It can be really frustrating. Then usually people are intimidated by white balance. They put it in auto and think the camera is capable. Unfortunately, it's not going to give you the best result. I'll be spending a lot of time today. I'm just going to scroll down here in this C-temp/filter option, as well as these custom set options down here. So you have some tools that can be really helpful to nail your white balance. Okay, these cards, I'll link these down below. You can pick these up for like $10 and they absolutely do the trick. You can also, I'm sure your camera came with one of these. Make sure y'all can see that. One of these, that's your lens cap or your sensor cap. And it also can actually be a pretty useful tool. So whether you have one of these cheaper gray cards or you have your lens cap, all of this is going to be doable with what I'm about to show you. Okay? But having something that's true white is also very valuable. Okay. So what you're trying to do to get, like we just looked at, when we get true white, everything else looks good. That's what we're going for. So I'm going to use this white card. You can also use a piece of paper as long as it doesn't have any like wrinkles on it. It actually makes a big difference. And with this white card, you want to make sure that it is facing your main light source first off, okay? Make sure it's facing your main light source. And we also want to make sure that we have the proper exposure first on that white card, utilizing the zebra method that we just looked at as an example, okay? So you have your white card set up, right? And all you're going to be doing over here, it's facing the light source, everything's exposed properly. Okay, so under your white balance setting, under the C-temp/filter, all you're going to be doing is adjusting this number until that white card on the back of your camera screen looks true white, right? So up here, it's kind of got an orange hue to it. Way down here, it has like a blue hue to it. You just want to make sure you find the point where that white card looks true white to your eye, and that would be your white balance for the shot. What you can also do that works with this white card, or you can use your lens cap. And if you don't have a white card and you want to use gray, just make sure these look true gray, or how they do to your eye. Make sure it looks like that on the back of the camera. What you can also do, I'm going to put this gray card here, also facing the main light source and making sure that we have exposure done first. Lens cap works too. Is you're going to go down to this custom set. In this custom set, you can click on this set button here, and you're going to get this orange target. Make sure that that orange target is completely covering a neutral gray or pure white, and you're just going to hit on set. And the camera is going to calibrate and say, okay, that is the right gray, which is why we recommend getting one of these gray cards or lens cap. Works with the white card too. And the camera is going to calibrate and say perfect white balance for this shot is 7,000 Kelvin, and that would be the white balance for this shot. Both of which work. We just got to be close. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect, and I'll show you about how that works in 1 second. Okay, so pulling all of that together, we're going to get our exposure and white balance using this gray card. Everything we're going to talk about can apply to any type of shot that you're doing. So taking a look at exposure first, we're using this gray card, and the target here, I'm going to put on my zebras. I'm going to go to level 50. Okay. Our target for that gray card, and again, zebras are just indicators, just telling us what something is either at that number or above that number, depending upon what we set it to. I put it at 50. Technically, the target for that gray card is 46 in a Sony camera without a picture profile on. But knowing that our zebras are showing up on it, so our goal here is to be able to get zebras to just barely be showing up. I'm going to start, well, first off, we can't use our shutter speed. I'm shooting in 29 frames a second, 30 frames a second, and our shutter speed is double that at 1/60. And I don't want to be changing my aperture too much. I want my aperture to be as low as possible to get as much blur as we possibly can in the background, which leaves me with two things to get the right exposure here. I can play with my ISO, but ideally, if you're able to, you can get your ISO as low as it'll go. And for this shot, looks like it's at 100. And then you can just be increasing your light value. If you have this option, if I increase my light here, coming in a little hot, but if I can increase my light value, then that also is going to add light into the scene. So what I'm trying to do, whether it's with ISO or with light, I'm trying to find the point. It looks like it's right about, we're seeing zebras disappearing on that gray card. Important to make sure that your gray card is facing the main light source here, right? So I'm trying to find that point where zebras, looks like it's right about there, right? Where zebras are disappearing completely off of that card, and they're still kind of on top of it, and now they're gone, right? We're seeing them over there on the left of the card because I have a scratch on my card, and it's got a little bit of white on it. That side's maybe better. There we go. But if we know that right now, right when they're just barely showing up on the card, that's a pretty good indicator that that is damn near, if not right at 50. And then if I just start slowly pulling back, whether it's ISO or light, until they just barely disappear, we know that that shot, you can put that down for a second, we know that that shot, that gray card is slightly below 50, somewhere between like, I don't know, 46 and 50, somewhere in there. So we got extremely close to 46. And this is what that shot would look like from an exposure perspective. The truth is, like, if you get that gray exposed properly at about 46, somewhere between 46 and 50 with that method, everything else in this scene is exposed properly, including the obvious thing we're going for here of Savannah's skin tone is going to be exposed properly. If you get the gray right, everything else in the same lighting, same scene, same conditions is going to be exposed properly. We can also utilize zebras if you don't have a gray card. It's good to have this trick up your sleeve too. Her skin tone per our chart value is going to need to be exposed at 70. So when I change my zebra values to 70, we're seeing zebras barely showing up on her face there. And I want to find the point where zebras just are barely there, if not disappearing, without losing all of our light. My light percent's pretty low right now. I actually want to keep that a little bit higher. So I'm actually just going to use aperture in this case to get, and again, it's always trade-offs. I prefer my aperture to be as low as possible, but in this situation, without my light going down next to nothing, I want my aperture to help me darken the image until zebras are just barely showing up on the brightest part of her face, and looks like that is going to be right there at f4, and this is how that shot would look. And next, moving into white balance, you want to make sure that you get your exposure done before your white balance to get the best results. These really like affordable gray and white cards come in a pack. I like using, this works for both, but I like using the white card for this one, so you can drop that gray one. A few things you can do here. Number one is I'm just going to go back into my white balance settings that we looked at earlier. I'm going to go down here to this custom set. I'm going to click on set, and I need to make sure that that orange box, you can move it, but you got to make sure that there is nothing in that orange box besides that white card. I can click on the center button, and it's saying that perfect white balance here is 5900. And I can go ahead and lock that in, and then I would re-get my frame, and that would be my white balance for that shot. The other thing that you can do is going back into my white balance settings here under the ctemp/filter, is you can just utilize the actual temperatures here and eyeball it to where it looks on the back of your screen true white, or true gray if you're using the gray card. Right now that looks a little bit too warm. Way down here looks a little bit too blue. And so I'm just trying to look at and find the point where that white card looks true white. And to me, it's right there, right? So you need both of those tricks up your sleeve, and this is how that shot would ultimately look with the proper exposure and the proper white balance. That's how I get white balance, and you need both of those tricks up your sleeve, whether you're using the custom set or the eyeball method, just in case, right? So it's good to have both of those to get the most flexible results with your camera. And then just, I'm in Premiere here, but you can do this in any editing software, but I like to get a reference frame. So just with that white card or gray card, doesn't matter. You can do this with both of them, but I'm just gonna use the white one for this example. With that reference card just up, I get a few frames of that, and then we can get rid of it and go on to whatever we're gonna be shooting. What you can do, you're just gonna use your color picker here for white balance, and you're just gonna select that, click on that, and we're just telling our editor that we want this thing to be pure white. I haven't clicked it yet. I want you guys to pay attention to the temperature and the tint over here. As soon as I click it in 3, 2, 1, it's gonna make some tiny refinements. That's the importance of getting it right in camera. If that were to have to make huge adjustments because we got it really wrong in camera, the other colors and tones are going to have a hard time looking good. So get it right in camera, whether you're eyeballing it or using like the gray cap or the gray card method to let the camera do the custom set. I'm more of an eyeball it guy, but either one works totally fine. And as long as you get a reference frame, you can just make those final tweaks in post-production and know that you have true white and the other colors and tones are going to look good. Those basics are going to get you out of the not so good space and into the epic when it comes to your video quality. But I'm sure you might have a few more specific questions, like when it comes to exposure, what if you have multiple skin tones in the same shot? How to expose when there isn't a skin tone in the scene? What aperture and shutter priority do? How to get exposure quickly when the lighting is changing in something like a vlog style shot when you might not want to be changing all of those settings manually and using a gray card. When to use shutter priority. How do variable neutral density filters, VND filters, how do those help with exposure? How to expose for product shots, landscape, and an interview shot like this one. Or maybe when it comes to white balance, you might have questions like how to use white balance for creative colors and tones. What's the best white balance setting for outdoors, indoors, sunset, studio? Why does my footage change colors mid-shot? Why do my colors look weird even though my camera is expensive? Adjusting white balance in post-production to make it look perfect. What do I do when I have multiple temperatures of light in the same shot? And lastly, some questions maybe about settings, like how to customize your camera with only the settings that you need for quick adjustments, the only settings that I customize on all of my Sony cameras, what this meter does and how it might not be the best method for exposure. I cover all of those as well as some additional information about the topics that we covered today in great detail in my Better Sony Videos in 1 Hour workshop. That's designed to have you feeling faster, more confident, and ultimately just creating the type of videos that you know you're capable of. And because you're watching this YouTube video right now, you can save 20% by using the code YT20. The link is down in the description for how to get into that workshop. I'll also put a link to it right here. And if you're watching me on the big screen, I'll put a QR code over here so that way you can check it out. And if you want to know my exact system for using a lot of what we talked about today, specifically in S-Log3, you want to check out this video where I dive into all of that. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Take care. See you.